Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored to have with us today from Germany, Dr. Ruediger Kuehr is with us today. He's the head of UNU-IAS SCYCLE, and he's the executive secretary of the STEP initiative. Welcome to Green is Good, Dr. Kuehr.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for coming on today. And you and I talked a little bit off air, and although you're a PhD and a brilliant one at that, you're so kind enough to allow me to call you Ruediger for today, and as well, and I'm so thankful you're on from Germany, and you're doing such important stuff. We're going to get to that in a second. But first, Ruediger, I'd love you to share a little bit about your journey. You have a fascinating journey, both by education and experiencing. Can you share that with our listeners today and share with them a little bit about your journey leading up to this very important work that you're doing?
Oh, sure, John. It's my pleasure doing so. So I'm a German native, and I was born in the countryside of Germany, surrounded by forests, etc., and this made me being very closely attached to environmental issues even when I was at high school already, and that made me a pupil movement, even also in the environmental council of my hometown. But from this I started to discover the world, and I lived in Japan and Sweden and elsewhere because of my duties with the United Nations. And here I was basically focusing really on how to make sustainable development more practical, what is required here from a technological viewpoint. And this is a driver in my activities since quite long during my entire journey from one place to another one. And this also made me developing quite some activities under the umbrella of the United Nations, but also aside from this. So from training, I'm not a technician, I'm a political scientist because I've been always very much attached to the social dimensions and less the hardcore work as such. And I think this is also a piece tremendously lacking in today's discussion when it comes to sustainable development, because we have a lot of solutions from a technological point in place, but we have little acceptance by the consumer and the human beings at the end of the day.
And so now you got into the whole issue. You've authored and co-authored and co-edited several books, including E-Waste in China, a country study, E-Waste from Recycling to Resources. And you've made this e-waste issue one of your main focuses. And for our listeners out there that want to learn more about your very important work and all the great things you're doing, they could follow along or go after the show to the website where they could find all the resources and all the information we're going to be discussing today at www.ias.unu.edu. Ruediger, can you share a little bit about the e-waste issue and how big is it today and why that you chose that issue to try to tackle and help make the world a better place from where you sit?
I mean, especially now in the season just around Christmas, where everybody is starting to buy presents, etc., which will be lying under the Christmas tree at the end of the day. And this is illustrating already one of the challenges, because much of these presents are coming along with batteries or plugs. So this is what we then categorize as electrical or electronic equipment. And there is an increasing amount of toys, other gadgets, including mobile phones, etc., equipped with batteries and plugs. And this is contributing to an increased amount of e-waste at the end of the day, simply because all these gadgets, machines, etc., will also one day become obsolete, and people have to dispose them off. And we have been trying to really assess the magnitude of that problem, because in order to inform policymakers, but also representatives from industry, you need to have a better understanding really what you're talking about, not only from the quality, so what kind of problems are associated with the issue, but also from the quantity as such. So, and this is why we have concluded, according to our statistical estimates, that we are producing actually 41 million metric tons of electrical waste per year around the globe. So everything what has a battery are a plug at the end of the day. And we are also estimating that this amount of e-waste is going to increase to 47 million tons per year already in the year 2017, simply because what I've described earlier.
Wow. So now the magnitude of the problem is immense. Talk about the challenges, that exist in tackling this problem. Are the challenges complex, and is it better in Europe than the U.S.? Is it better in Asia than in Europe? Compare the continents against each other and talk about the complexities that exist when it comes to tackling the e-waste problem.
Yeah. The complexity is already in the machines as such. Because if we only take our mobile phone, there are more than 60 elements of the periodic table already in such a mobile phone. And to get them all recycled, so if we are doing material recycling at the end of the day, it's quite a challenge. And though it might be technological feasible, it's not economical at the end of the day, really to look or to get back the most little tiny element in such a mobile phone. And this is only a mobile phone. We also have the computers. We have the white goods. These are the dishwashers, etc. We are concentrating, and we have all the toys and electric toothbrushes, etc. So, and all these machines are produced along a global supply chain. So there are different producers providing components which are then assembled under possibly a very popular brand name, and finally it's consumed by us for a certain period of time, but the period of time is decreasing because of technological innovation, and that because people are interested also to get the latest developments from technology.
Right.
And at the end of the day, people have hardly any knowledge what to do with these machines at the end of their life.
Right.
So much of this is disposed of with a normal household bin, finally incinerated or going to landfills. And by this, we are then also wasting a lot of valuable resources. And as I explained earlier, because of the fact that so much elements of the periodic table are in a mobile phone, and if we are not appropriately disposing it off at the end of life, we are losing these. And by this, it could also become the case that we are then losing very elementary elements for the production of these kind of machines, which will put then rather pressure also on our future production systems.
Right. And so you're saying the machines are getting shorter in life because of so much, the innovations coming so fast, and then the fact that we have a myriad of machines that when you go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas every year, 20,000 new machines come out a year, and again, there's a complexity of the machines themselves. There's no standardization to them, and therefore the speed of the turnover and the complexity and the number of different SKUs that exist create a very challenging problem in e-waste.
Absolutely. And another driver is certainly also costs in all here, because we consumers are interested to have very fancy gadgets at the end of the day at a very low price. And this is definitely impacting also the design of the machines, which does not then easily allow to recycle or refurbish these kind of machines. So our consumer behavior is also having a certain impact here on the production. And all these elements are finally then coming together in order to create what we call the e-waste challenge. And it's a challenge which is global as such, because even the countries in the developing world are now trying to close the digital divide and are using mobile phones and many other machines in order to have also access to the latest information, etc. But the responses are also differing around the world. But you asked me earlier, John, to describe or analyze how the situation in the US and in Europe or elsewhere is looking like.
Yeah.
I think the last years have shown really that this issue is getting on the political agenda in many places on the world. But politicians are also finding out, okay, it's a very complex one. We are not the only ones in order to really pave paths towards solutions. We need closer cooperation with other stakeholders. We need global cooperation in order to harmonize approaches, in order to avoid leakages out of developed solutions, etc. And this is simply the challenge we are facing. So we are seeing at the moment that a lot of countries in Africa are trying to develop their own e-waste legislation, following models in Europe, in the US, in Japan, and elsewhere. But they are also finding out, okay, we cannot simply adjust what has been proved successful in Europe or elsewhere and trying to implement in Africa. No, we need our own solution here in order to meet also psychological, cultural backgrounds, economic drivers, etc. And this brings along all the complexity.
That's a brilliant point in terms of the cultural, geographic, and social differences that exist on all the different continents. You know, what we love doing on this show, Ruediger, is talking about solutions. And I know that you have some brilliant ideas when it comes to solutions. So can you share with our listeners, and again, for our listeners out there that want to learn more about Ruediger's great work that he's doing at the United Nations, please go to www.ias.unu.edu. Let's talk about some of your brilliant solutions when it comes to the multi-stakeholder network, such as the Solving the E-Waste Problem STEP initiative, and how is that contributing to starting to turn back the tide of the e-waste tidal wave that is now washing over the entire world, as you well point out?
Yeah, John, we started developing such kind of initiative simply out of the need that we need to get a better understanding of the e-waste challenge as such in order to work out scientifically really what we are confronted with, but on the other hand, to guide also these analyses into concrete solutions at the end of the day. And as I pointed out earlier, we require here close cooperation of all the stakeholders in one way or another involved in e-waste related discussions. These are the producers who are taking up a certain responsibility. These are the recyclers who are taking a responsibility in appropriately recycling and collecting also these obsolete equipment. These are the refurbishers or repair shops, etc., who are in one way or another dealing with these machines in order to extend the lifetime. We are also talking to the consumer groups in order to really get a better knowledge what is driving consumers, what is holding them back in order to dispose of appropriately the e-waste at the end of the day. We are talking to NGOs who are pointing rightly to very weak points in existing systems, etc., and by this also illustrating to policymakers, who is another group we are talking to and working with, in order to take action. So, and this finally resulted in the creation of the Solving the E-Waste Problem, or in short, STEP initiative, which is then taking up concrete projects in order to illustrate really how a possible solution could be looking like, but also what else is needed in order to come to solutions. So joint definitions, how a system can be designed better in order to have more return of gadgets, obsolete gadgets, etc. taking place. So all these different facets are very needed. And this is why we thought from the very beginning on a close involvement of all the different stakeholders. It's definitely not easy because it's a multitude of players with different interests, but it's worth taking these initiatives, and it's worth also working within such kind of initiative, because you will easily realize how creative the players are becoming, how open they are listening to the challenges others are facing, etc. So it's a very, very good experience, despite challenges we are also facing in such kind of initiative.
You know, Ruediger, that's so brilliant. So are you doing this in one specific region, or is this cross-continental, or where are you implementing your multi-stakeholder network, and where are you finding it to get the most traction to date?
Yeah. So because of my affiliation with the United Nations, we have a certain must also in here, and it should be global. And it's related also to the challenge because it's a global challenge, and we will not have good regional or local solutions only in place. Global cooperation is very much needed. But very practically speaking, John, we have developed it first in Europe. And this is why there was also a rather focus on European issues at the very beginning. But we have expanded it further, and we have now membership coming from all continents around the world, and we have established good cooperation with all these members coming from all around the globe. But it's definitely also partly challenging, really, for good interaction with some players because of time differences, because of access to email, etc. But this is something we are working on, and this is also something other initiatives are experiencing themselves. But these are the challenges of today's life, and we are taking it up.
Got it. Well, you know, it's important for our listeners out there, both in the United States and around the world, because we have listeners throughout Europe and Asia as well. Can you share a little bit your view, Ruediger, on the consumer's role in becoming part of the solution? And that's really important. This is not just for one, as you've done, you've taken a multi-stakeholder network approach, which I think is so brilliant because it closes the loop. Can you share how consumers also have an important role in the e-waste challenge?
Yeah, I think consumers are not so much aware really of the e-waste challenge as such. Consumers are picking information from the media of e-waste challenges in developing countries. They see kids, for example, standing in a smoke because of burning cables in order to have access to copper. But this is, and the consumer are finally interpreting this media also reflection in a way, okay, it's not our problem, it's a problem in the developing world.
Right.
But then they are getting aware more and more probably of the fact, okay, it's our waste which is, by whatever reason, shipped to these countries. So what is the role we can play in here? And I think the consumers have an important role to play in here. For example, when they are purchasing equipment in a supermarket or any other shop, in order to ask really whether the shop has any information how the brand is treating the equipment at the end of the life, how to best dispose of equipment at the end of life. I mean, it appears like a foolish question asking these kind of things when you purchase a brand new machine, which you want to use probably a couple of years. But it's so much of importance that probably companies are also starting to compete not only for a very nice looking and fancy and latest technology product, but also competition there out how companies are treating their equipment of the end of life. Maybe they have good return systems already in place. Maybe they are rewarding the consumer, etc. These are questions consumers should ask, also when it comes to refurbishment, upgrade, etc. And here we must simply educate consumers much more so that they are aware these are elements very important to consider, also to maintain and probably increase our consumption of latest technologies in the future, because we are not against these latest developments. Our attempt is simply trying our best to close the loops so that no leakage is taking place and that we are not wasting valuable resources, but resources are returned and going back into the production again.
I love it. Well, thank you so much today, Ruediger. Your vision and your expertise is just wonderful. We thank you for being so brilliant and taking on this very important and challenging issue. It's not easy, but you're doing this head on, and we appreciate that. For our listeners out there that want to learn more about the very important, e-waste steps that are being done right now on the multi-stakeholder network, go to www.ias.unu.edu. Dr. Ruediger Kuehr, thank you for being a visionary, helping to solve our e-waste problem and making the world a better place. You are truly living proof that green is good.